Hello, everybody. Welcome again. And just wanted to get another update from Sabina Hickman at PHTA.
How you doing, Randy?
Doing fantastic, Sabina. How's everything going?
We're good. We're good. Entering into week 3 of the pandemic and seeing a little bit of optimism. As you guys all know, the news came out that looks like New York's starting to flatten out. I know people are watching their stocks, and we've had 2 days of upticks. So that's been great from a National Association perspective. Getting a lot of calls about, obviously, the CARES Act, some frustration with the banks not being ready. I know PHTA has submitted paperwork and our bank said hold tight. They have to get a little bit coordinated on their end. So kind of a waiting game there. Also, we had a Builders Council call yesterday, and it was great to get our engaged volunteers on a call and hear some of the optimism. They're starting to plan for the show in November, which as of now, we're still planning to all meet in Vegas. So a lot of great information sharing. We've got 2 of our board leaders on the phone today to share their perspective as well. And once again, we want to thank Ask the Masters for including us on their podcast.
Yeah, we're super happy to be here and kind of just give an update. Seems like there's not a lot of breaking news, but we just did want to check in with you. And I just want to go through the list of who we've got on the call. So we've got Attorney Steve Getzoff, we've got Chris Curcio from kind of the Midwest, incoming Chair Franceen, and then obviously Sabina is here with us, and then a couple of our folks. So let's kind of get right into it. Sabina, you kind of had hit on a little bit of the frustration. I know I submitted all of my CARES Act paperwork on Friday in a small regional bank, but I know a number of people that I've talked to, especially with some of the bigger banks, like Wells Fargo has already shut down and is no longer taking applications. So what are you guys hearing from DC area regarding, is the president, are you hearing that he's going to add more funding to this, or what are you hearing? You're closer to the source than we are.
So what we're hearing from our lobbyist is that it was probably launched very quickly. They anticipated folks, the influx that came in on the front end was pretty overwhelming. He said, you're just gonna have to be patient. Make sure, I know you're working with the regional bank, we are as well. Having those banking relationships will help in terms of getting updates. He's saying, have your members work directly with the bank. Once you get the loan application, it's all gonna fall in the hands of the bank. But he said, unfortunately, we're just gonna have to be patient through the whole application process. Our bank's telling us it's gonna be months before you see any type of funding.
All right, so question for you, Chris. There was a lot to digest last week. What did your week look like? You're bringing a new perspective that we haven't really had on here yet. So you bring the perspective of retail. So what are you seeing in the retail space?
Well, we've been dealing with a lot of folks all across the country. I know the group at PHTA has been knocking themselves out. Steve Getzoff has been involved with a lot of it. Jennifer Hatfield and the GR team there has been, not only are they dealing with things with Carl Chidlow on a national level, but you've got 50 states that are making 50 different rules about closures and so forth. So really, not only have we, I've been involved in that extensively, trying to assist where I can, give advice as to what's going on in Ohio, but then also dealing with what's going on in Ohio. We're under a stay-at-home order, dealing with some of the same issues that everyone in our industry is trying to justify why we are essential, keeping pools open, maintaining pools, making sure that we don't have additional issues with breakouts of with other disease that might take place. So keeping stores open, dealing with the CARES Act. I think I filled out the application or information about 12 different times for that, because that kept getting updated and changed. Ours has been submitted. I'm dealing with a local bank as well, and they're telling me a week or two everything has been turned in. But so yeah, it's been definitely challenging. We've had to lay off some employees because we have had to reduce services. We've reduced store hours. We're going through the same process everybody else is, sanitizing every surface, cleaning, making sure all of our vehicles are equipped with all the needs for making sure that we're creating a safe environment as we're going to someone's home, to work in their backyard, gloves, masks, things like that, to not only keep our customers safe, but keep our employees safe as well. So it's been challenging, to say the least. My first global pandemic, I must say.
So are you actually slowing down a little bit? Are you seeing a slowdown? I mean, it seems hit and miss across the country. Areas like Florida are really seeming to ramp up on the service side, and we're even hearing, from like New York, that people are opening pools early because the winter was so mild. What areas are you having to lay off in, and what areas are you seeing an uptick, or is it mostly just slowed down?
Service is definitely ticking up. People are home, obviously, so they figure, and the weather has been more mild, so that's definitely helpful. A lot of times in Ohio, it's still snowing here in April, so weather's mild. It was 65 and sunny out yesterday, so people are really getting aggressive, get pools open, kids are home from school, things like that. So we're laying off on the retail end. So the retail side of it, businesses maybe about a quarter to a third of what it has been in years past around this same time frame, but service is definitely up. We're opening pools earlier. We're doing more repairs, doing more heater installs, pump installs, things like that. So the service side is definitely picked up. But the retail side, we're doing curbside pickups. We're fortunate enough to have a robust online store already. So we're just really making some modifications to it. If somebody wasn't already prepared with something like that, where they could bring those things online quickly, those are difficult services to try to bring on now. But yeah, we've been fortunate on that end of it, that we've already got that opportunity on the retail side.
Great. So that brings me kind of to my next question, and I'm going to point this toward Stephen. So as businesses are kind of facing some of these challenges and some of the questions about laying people off, what kind of advice do you have for, how businesses can stay open, and, what are some of the challenges that businesses face that you can shed some light on?
Well, first of all, this is my first pandemic also, and it's the first pandemic for all of us. So there's a lot of unknowns here. What we do know is that approximately 40 states have now issued some form of stay-at-home order. And so every business around the country, the first question they're asking, like Chris, is, can I stay open? What can I do? What can I do? I build pools, I service pools, I got a storefront. Which of these functions are permitted? Which of these functions are forbidden now? And so you have to go to individual state order. And they run the gamut. A lot of states have adopted the CISA 1.0 guidelines. A number of them have adopted the newer version that came out on March 28th, and many states have just simply gone with their own language. The problem is, except for Florida and Connecticut, none of the states mention pools one way or another. Just like they don't mention about a million other different trades one way or another. So we have to determine our ability to open almost by inference. Most of the states do recognize that services that are necessary for the safety and sanitation of residences are essential. And we view that to mean cleaning and maintaining and servicing pools. Because as Chris pointed out, if pools are not maintained, if the water is not treated, there is a risk of unsafe and unsanitary conditions that affect not just the people in that house, but also their neighbors as well. When it comes to construction, it's, again, there's a lot of variation. Some states have simply allowed all construction to continue. Some states have only allowed essential construction, which means construction that's part of the infrastructure. New York State, for example, initially allowed all construction. Then last Friday, a week ago Friday, New York State decided there would be no more construction, except if you had to finish a project because leaving it in its current condition was unsafe. So we've basically taken the position that if you left a hole in the ground without proper barrier around it, or if it hasn't been secured by your walls or by your shell or by your shotcrete, that you need to finish it to prevent an unsafe condition. The best way to try to keep track of all of this is to stay in touch with PHTA. Our site updates basically daily, state by state. So when you go to our site, you will see a summary of what's going on in your given state and what it allows and doesn't allow as it specifically relates to the pool industry. You'll also see a link to the actual order that you can read and any FAQs that the state has posted. And finally, we've distilled all of this into an Excel spreadsheet that basically takes the 5 most common categories that affect us, and basically it's a why or a blank or an explanation as to what you can or can't do. Now, when it comes to trying to maintain your workforce, that's a different challenge, obviously. As Chris pointed out, many of us have had to reduce our staff, and that's a painful situation because this is not just a personnel issue, it's a personal issue. This is our family. These are the people whose sweat and toil has helped us get where we are, and hopefully will help us get back where we are eventually. So companies have to look at the employment laws that affect their jurisdictions. The federal government has a WARN Act for massive layoffs over a certain size. States have smaller versions of those acts as well. So if you're laying off that many people, you need to know whether they have certain rights of advance notification and whether under your state's law you can argue that the situation changes changes their rights. In addition, we need to understand the differences between leaves of absence or furloughs, which typically, and again, it can vary by state, but typically don't trigger unemployment benefits, but do keep people on health insurance, versus a termination, which would immediately trigger unemployment insurance, but also would leave somebody left with COBRA, which is probably a much more expensive way of keeping their health insurance. So again, there's no simple uniform answer there. It's basically case by case.
Yeah, I'd like to bring Franceen and on this as well, and both you, Stephen, and Franceen. I would love to know: does PHTA actually have an official position on whether pools should be serviced? I mean, obviously, I think that's pretty clear that you guys have a position on that. But like, we're starting to see some real nitty-gritty questions, like in New York. Should pools be opened, and should they be allowed to be opened as opposed to just maintaining open pools? So do you guys actually have an official position on something like that?
Absolutely. Our official position is, first of all, pools must be maintained. Otherwise, they're a health risk, as Chris pointed out. Our position also is that an unopened pool, again, still has the risk of stagnant water accumulating on the cover, and it should be open, and it should be maintained, and the water should be kept clean. Obviously, we found that it's an easy sell on the open pools. In New York, at least, they haven't responded to our position paper on the opening of pools that are closed so far.
Okay, so you guys actually do have a formal position paper that is that available online at the PHTA website?
Yes.
Okay. So Franceen, I'd love to bring you in because your company, you also do big municipal type stuff. You do water parks, you do that kind of thing. And so from a construction perspective, where is this whole event finding your company, and what are you guys seeing on the big commercial side of things?
Well, Whitewater's we're a global business. So we have offices in China, in Europe, also in the Middle East and in North America. So our headquarters is based out of Canada. But what I will say is that when we saw this hitting in China, it was greatly affecting them. We knew at one point it was going to affect us. And so we had a little bit of advance notice as a global company to say, okay, if this is happening here, how is it going to affect the rest of our business? So, really kudos to a lot of our team on site was really about how do we service our customers. One, there's a bunch of them that are already in their projects. Their projects were already started. There's a few places where the sites closed completely. As this was starting to hit in the United States, as some of these states were starting to shut down, basically some of those project sites were being shut down. It was literally from one day to the next. It was, okay, it's time for the entire crew to leave. And now you're thinking, okay, how do we secure this site? And then how do we leave? And then how do we come back? How do we come back and finish this? And being able to come back and finish it before the season starts, if there's a season. I think that's the big question for everyone. Is there going to be a season? So whether it's a municipal park or whether it's a big water park or whether it's on a cruise ship, a lot of those projects started to slow down. There are some glimmers of hope though, and I will say that in our China office reopened. We have our projects that have continued. We're doing construction right now on some water parks in China. The Middle East continues to keep moving. But we do have to start looking at what are we doing about the projects that were in development. What we're finding is a lot of greenfield projects that were already in development. People are already committed to the capital investment. They're actually accelerating. They're saying, hey, there's capacity right now. Please, let's accelerate on my project because I know I'm going to get a return on investment as soon as this recovers. Others where it was more of an expansion or maybe a remodel, some of those folks are saying, well, hold on, I need to hold on to my cash. And I already have a facility, but I need to hold on to my cash and maybe I'm going to slow down a little bit on my project. So we want to be there for our customers. We want to be able to ramp up right away. We also have to be servicing them. We have some project sites in Mexico, in the Cancun region, where our project managers and our site supervisors are actually advising remotely. So it's a completely new world for them. But we're finding that if the local construction site can keep going and we can still advise, let's keep going. We need people to be able to recover as quickly as possible. So yeah, glimmers of hope around the country, around the world. But the United States, we have parks that are closed. We have public pools that are closed. We have cruise is dramatically affected. And of course, a lot of the resorts are closed. So we have to be ready to take care of our customers and be ready with resources.
Yeah, Randy, you and I were chatting a little bit this morning about some of the good news coming out of China and really how China seems to be rebounding very, very quickly, and that's having kind of a positive effect on kind of on the markets and that. Can you chat about that a little bit? Because it sounds like Franceen has seen similar things.
Yeah. I think there's some concern. I've been watching the markets, and we're up 10%, I think, over the last week. And they're speculating that China's, economy is coming back so fast that there could be some dramatic changes as we try and wrap it up in the States. So, I think Franceen, that was a great global outlook, and we can see where it's going. I think we've got to do what we can do to really stay tight this week and get through this thing. And we know that we're going to come out the other end okay. Staycations are going to really take advantage. People are going to be afraid to head out to some of Franceen's resorts right away. So, we want to take advantage of that and get our backyards in order. And I think we're going to be doing exactly what Franceen's doing, but for a lot of us, it's going to be in the backyard markets and stuff. So.
Well, speaking of that, we have seen a lot of uptick in residential requests for kind of their mini water park in their backyard. So that's been another glimmer of hope. I think people are recognizing that their backyard is now their new leisure site. But, it's so important for, I think, as the industry to be able to advocate that pools are an essential business, not only from the biological threat side. You don't want these pools to be a threat, but you want these pools to be a haven for family togetherness. You want it to be a haven for wellness. You want it to be a haven for that type of stay at home, get people to stay at home. What better way if you can entertain them at home? So all the more reason why these residential pools need to be a haven for that kind of, for getting over this hump.
You're a perfect spokesperson to pull us up out of this whole thing, Franceen. You know, the glimmer of hope and round in the corner is exactly the that leadership we need. So, you know, the positive thoughts for today. I like it this Tuesday.
So
Anybody
what
else?
about, yeah, I just have a couple more things before we button up. You know, we talked about opening of pools. You know, we are starting to see a development across the country where certain municipalities are now saying, you know, you can permit, but you can't necessarily start digging a hole that is not in place. What is PHTA's position on that? You know, I can see some wisdom in both directions. And so, do you guys have an official stance on that, or where do you guys sit?
Well, on existing construction, we have a clear stance. Once you got the hole in the ground, you need to finish it for a number of safety reasons, whether it's not having proper barriers where someone can drown in the pool, or allowing the hole in the ground to collapse and creating some other major problems. We have not taken an official position that a state that eliminates all non-essential construction should make an exception for pools. While we clearly agree with everything that Francine and Randy have talked about in terms of the health benefits of pools, and yes, I think people will shelter in place much better if they have a pool they can use, it's a pretty tough sell to go to an authority like New York State or some of the other states that are seeing high concentrations here and saying, well, we're not going to build houses, but we need to build pools. So we have to pick our spots. And I think the spot of you've got to keep servicing the pools, you got to open them, you got to maintain them, let people use them is an easy sell. The spot of you got to finish it once you've dug the hole is not an easy sell, but it's an easier sell than the idea that, hey, you should let somebody still send a crew into the backyard, you know, working shoulder to shoulder and putting a new pool in.
Perfect. One more question that I wanted to pose to you, Stephen, is, you know, we've mentioned the PHTA website, and we've talked about that as a great resource. But what are some other ideas, and what are some other areas that people should be looking at, you know, as they're starting to ramp down and as they're seeing, you know, their financials get a little bit tighter? What are some of the things that they should be kind of exploring from a business perspective in order to weather this?
Right. First of all, we talked about the CARES Act briefly. So make sure if you're a company of less than 500 people, make sure you've got your application in. Yes, it's going to take some time. The banks have never seen anything like this. My firm had our application on Friday evening. We have a bank we've been doing business for years, and we're still told that we have to be patient. On the other hand, I've spoken to some other firms whose applications were approved on Saturday. So it's happening, but it's happening slowly. I have not heard concerns about the money running out, either because of the sheer amount of it, $350 billion, or because I've already been reading reports in the news about Congress and the president talking about feeding more money into that program if necessary. But make sure you get your application in and figure out what you're entitled to. Number two, a number of different jurisdictions, states and localities are providing some other forms of relief. It may not be as extensive. A number of cities and states are offering disaster relief loans. These are loans you may have to show collateral for, you may have to guarantee, and you will have to pay back, usually at fairly low interest rates of 3 to 4%, but that's someplace else you can look. Some states have looked at rent deferment or rent forgiveness laws. There's a big difference, obviously, between deferring your obligations and forgiving them, but see what's going on in your state, see if there is any ability. And finally, if you're paying mortgage, talk to your bank about forbearance or forgiveness or some way of letting you get by for a couple of months and maybe working those payments evenly over the remainder of the loan. Talk to your landlord. We did the same thing at my firm. If your landlord is basically an institutional landlord, you're not the first and not the last person who's going to be talking to them about some form of relief. So think of all your options, be in touch with your attorneys, be in touch with your financial professionals, and we'll all get through this somehow.
Just a
Dave,
little.
oh, sorry, Randy. I was just going to say really quickly, start thinking about the recovery mode as well. I know I've had conversations with Chris and Francine, as well as Janae, who's our VP of Marketing. PHTA is starting to think about the recovery. When we get out of this, how are we going to promote the industry? Talk to consumers about the value of your staycation and building a pool. People are going to be apprehensive about getting on a flight and traveling overseas. So we're starting to think about recovery mode. I know Chris, you might want to talk about how you're able to take advantage of some of the advertisements, and you've cranked out some new ads to, at a discounted rate to take advantage of kind of the times that we're facing. I've seen a lot of our members start thinking about how am I going to position my company once we get through this pandemic and it's time to do business again. So I would encourage listeners to also think about the recovery phase.
I mean, I can talk to the advertising piece of it real quick. Is that we're buying ads right now that we're running on TV. We're $200-300 a spot. We're getting between $2 and $10 a spot right now, and really the ads we're running right now are just about we're in it with you. We understand what's going on right now, but eventually we're all going to come out of this on the other side of it. And aren't we going to want to spend time with family and friends once we're able to do so again? So that's really kind of our positioning on it. But we understand that everybody's in this crisis together, and we're all hanging out isolated at home now. So no, I think that's the truth. I think the consumer already is beginning to think about that. The consumers that we're in contact with, and we're doing a lot of selling over the internet. Very few people are actually coming to the store. We're doing screen-to-screen selling. They'll call us. They can look at our website and get the information. We're looking at the same page on our website that they're looking at, and then we can email digital information over to them as well. All of our forms have been turned into fill-in PDF forms, so that if there are any contracts that need signed or anything like that, we can email them. They can fill them out, email them right back to us with the pertinent information. So we've all had to adapt. That's just the way it is. And I think there are going to be some things that we're adapting to right now that may become more permanent solutions long-term for our businesses as well. So I think there are some good things that are coming out of it. The technology that a lot of us are implementing, I think we may find a lot more people being able to work remotely than we ever thought before, because somehow we found a way to make it happen. So I think there are some very good things coming out, and we're going to be happy on the other side of this as well.
Chris, thank you so much. Sabina, for bringing everybody along. Francine, you were absolutely brilliant. Thanks for the inspiration and the legal advice there from Stephen too. They are PHTA, and they are helping us get through this thing together. And we'll see everybody on the other side. Take care, you guys.